Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has managed to keep a spot in Parliament after being elected to the newly redrawn constituency of Fareham and Waterlooville. But she's recently flown to Washington, D.C. to say this.
Far, far too many Tory politicians agreed, and still agree, that the progress flag must be flown. To be kind, to be inclusive. It shows how liberal and progressive we are. And that's what many Conservatives want us to be. Well, the progress flag says to me, it says to me one monstrous thing, that I was a member of a government that presided over the mutilation of our children in our hospitals and from our schools.
It's very clear to me that Suella Braverman is, personally, it's my opinion, I guess, that she's a grifter. Like, this is somebody who understands that the brand of conservative politics that they've been running on for a very, very long time, of sound economics and liberal values, it's dying a death, both here and across the pond as well. There's a reason why she's doing all of her speeches over in Washington, D.C. She went to the American Enterprise Institute to make her big speech about the failure of multiculturalism in the UK, and has also did her little grifty trips to Israel as well, to take the side of Netanyahu further, indeed, than many other conservative politicians would have gone. Now, of course, this could also be part of her personal brand to try and stand for Conservative Party leader, but it's clear to me that she believes that in the absence of sound economic management being part of the Conservative brand, the only way that they can win, and also on top of that, the only way that she can market herself, is trying to move the Conservative brand closer to Reform UK, closer to the culture war, closer actually away from the median voter, really and truly. The Labour Party's plan over this election was to win over the median voter by being essentially entirely about sound economic management. And if she continues down this road, it may make her a lot of money on the circuit, and may make her a lot of money being able to do these speeches for all these different kind of think tank institutions like the Heritage Foundation, etc., etc. But will it lead the Conservative Party to electoral success? Probably not. But what it will do is it will absolutely drag down the debate in this country, forcing all of our media and political class to try and pander to the overexposed opinions of people who have the backing of financial institutions, who are using their power to be able to undermine the rights of minorities in this country, which could lead to pretty scary times ahead for people in my community.
That was Braverman speaking at the National Conservatism Conference. But LGBT rights weren't the only area where Braverman took aim at the government that she was involved in as Home Secretary. Because over at the Popular Conservatism Conference, a separate conference, Braverman gave this summary of the Tories' track record on immigration.
We didn't mention immigration. We didn't want to talk about immigration. We didn't want to see immigration. But immigration spiraled out of control. And we failed and refused to tackle head-on the discussion about the role of out-of-control population growth in one very small place, and the pressure that has put on pushing asset inflation sky high, on putting pressure on our public resources and our services, and on our cultural and national identity. Didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to look at it. And as a result, people felt very angry and very betrayed with our track record. So, to my mind, that's a diagnosis of what went wrong. And in a nutshell, that can be summed up as, we did not do what we promised to do.
We were just saying, that looks like something out of 1984, or John Hurt in V for Vendetta, with Ingsoc. Very, very strange. Why would you lean into those aesthetics when it's your politics? Anyway, what she had to say about reform was also highly instructive.
The level of catastrophe really was aggravated by the fact that reform emerged on the political landscape as a phenomenon. Now, to my mind, the reform phenomenon was entirely predictable and avoidable, and all our own fault. It's no good denigrating reform voters. It's no good smearing the Reform Party. It's no good comparing reform rallies to the rallies of Nuremberg. That's not going to work. Criticizing people for voting reform is a fundamental error to make. Historically, in British politics, we have had the monopoly on the right-wing vote. That's one of the reasons why we've been so successful politically. The left, by contrast, for the last 100 years, has been split. Left-wing voters have had a choice of party to go for. And we, by contrast, have had the luxury of a monopoly, but no longer.
What is going on there? Because the sound quality is really good. They've clearly got a good connection, but the image is literally from like a 1980s video camera, and she's blue. Why is she blue? I don't get it. Why is she blue? I understand poor image quality. Why is she blue? She's talking there about why the Tories lost, and it's obviously fair to say that yes, the right-wing vote was split, and she's lamenting about immigration. But what she's failing to mention is Rwanda, which was, this totemic policy that she tied herself to as Home Secretary. It's just been cancelled by Keir Starmer. It cost this country hundreds of millions. We're pretty sure we've now lost £270 million. Kigali and Paul Kagame, the government over in Kigali, Rwanda, they are refusing to give us the money back. Wow. It's just extraordinary. The Tories gave hundreds of millions of pounds to Rwanda for nothing. That will have a massive impact on the Tory political brand for a very long time. And that's on you. But like so many people in the Conservative Party, I have to say in politics more generally, but they've lost. So let's stick with Tories. She is incapable of taking personal responsibility. Helena, here's a question for you. Do you think Suella Braverman, given the excuses she was making for reform and given the political tone of what she said in that first clip we played with regards to LGBT rights, the pride flag, etc., is she trying to be thrown out of the Conservative Party so she has a license to join reform?
I don't think so. It's interesting to think about. I've not really contemplated the idea that somebody might want to do that who is in such a big position to essentially be the leader of the opposition in a few weeks' time. She's a really big figure in the Conservative Party. There are obviously plenty of other people who are vying for support there, but she's certainly got an undercurrent of support within members, whether she can corral the parliamentary Conservative Party around her, given how much of a wrecker that she was in the background as a backbencher at the time. That's an interesting postulate. I don't know. Really don't know whether or not she would be trying to get thrown out of the Conservative Party for that, given, again, how much of a wrecker she was beforehand. It's surprising that she didn't get thrown out before now. What is interesting, though, is that when she talks about things like immigration, she says, "Oh, this is good. We've ceded ground on the right." And I'm like, well, actually, immigration isn't necessarily like a right-wing issue in particular. Right-wing parties certainly focus on it, but the electorate, the people who she says that they lost to Reform UK, didn't just come from the Conservative Party. They came throughout the electorate, and only a third of them said that they would back the Conservatives. And it's difficult to think about whether or not that she would be in a position to be welcomed by somebody like Nigel Farage, given the figure that she holds in politics as well. Because it's clear that Nigel Farage has no intention at all of being part of the Conservative brand at this point. He's been very clear personally, and maybe he's got a bigger plan that I don't know about, but he's been very clear about wanting to destroy the Conservative Party. And if the movement in politics moves towards reform and away from the Conservatives, it's clearly within Suella Braverman's personal interests to defect to Reform UK. But I don't think she needs to get thrown out to do that.
Her majority went down from 26,000 to 6,000. Reform came fourth, but they got 9,000 votes. So it was, 17,000 for Suella Braverman and then like 11,000 and 9 and 8. It's not a four-way marginal because she has still a reasonable majority. So it was 17,000 for Suella Braverman, 11,000 for Labour, 9,000 Lib Dem, 9,000 Reform. So, frankly, as somebody moderately familiar with that seat, if she stood for Reform, she'd have a bigger majority. And it's something that Nigel Farage said to Leah Anderson, if only more of your colleagues had crossed the floor, or at that point, joined Reform, like Leah Anderson did, uniquely, they would still have their seats. And by the way, he's right. Many of them would. Not many, probably about a dozen more of them would. So from a personal point of view, it is interesting. I mean, is she going to jump ship now? I don't know. It may make political sense to do it before the next general election. We'll see.